unfold.
Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving into a subject that for a long time has been treated with this kind of almost mythological reverence.
Human longevity.
Human longevity. For decades, if you wanted the secret to living past 100, the answer was always the same. Find a blue zone.
Okinawa, Sardinia, Nicoya. The list is pretty famous.
Exactly. And the dogma was simple.
Huh?
Move somewhere isolated, eat a bunch of plants, and, find a really tight-knit community.
And that dogma, that sort of romanticized view, is dissolving. And it's dissolving fast.
Yeah.
What the scientific community, what demographers are confirming now is that the longevity advantage in these specific places, what we can call Blue Zones 1.0, was largely a fleeting thing, a historical accident.
An accident of geography, right? And isolation and tradition.
Precisely. And that accident is being completely undone by globalization.
Which is why we're talking about this. We're looking at the rapid, and I mean, frankly, the violent collapse of the accidental centenarian. And that collapse demands a whole new blueprint.
It does.
Our central premise for this deep dive is that we're seeing a complete tectonic shift. We're moving from that accidental health of Blue Zones 1.0 to what the future actually looks like. Blue Zones 2.0.
Environments of intentional, engineered health design.
Yes.
What's so fascinating here is how these biological mechanisms for survival and repair, which were once triggered by chance, a sparse food supply, having to walk everywhere, a strong clan structure.
Things people did because they had to.
Exactly. Now those same mechanisms are being systematically activated by sophisticated public policy.
So our mission today is twofold. First, we're going to dissect the detailed scientific reasons for the demographic collapse of those original zones.
We'll get into the metabolic stuff, the genetic vulnerabilities that globalization just ripped open.
And then second, we're going to do an exhaustive analysis of the Singapore model, because it really is the vanguard of this engineered longevity.
We're moving from just passively observing healthy habits to actively biosocial engineering. It's about understanding the molecular architecture of a long life and then, literally building a society around it.
So let's start where the shockwave was felt the strongest. Okinawa. For decades, this island was the gold standard, the poster child for global longevity. They had the lowest rates of cardiovascular disease in the world, the highest density of centenarians. If you wanted to study long life, you went to Okinawa.
And today, you wouldn't. That title is gone. The shift there is genuinely shocking to the people who've studied the area for years. It's not a gentle slide.
No.
It's what researchers now call a precipitous statistical crash, or even more memorably, the Okinawa shock. It really represents a complete failure of that old Blue Zone model to withstand modernity.
Just how brutal are the numbers when you actually chart the transition?
They're stark. You have to look at the census data. So up until the year 2000, Okinawan male life expectancy was consistently ranked #1. First among all 47 of Japan's prefectures.
#1.
But in the span of just 10, maybe 15 years, it plummeted. By 2010, they had fallen to 26th place.
26th. That's a monumental drop.
It is, for a place that was a global health capital. And if you look at the most recent data, their life expectancy advantage is, well, it's statistically gone. In fact, for men, they're now living slightly shorter lives on average than on the Japanese mainland.
And this is so crucial, that collapse isn't uniform across the whole island, right? It's not like everyone aged 10 years overnight. You have to look at the generational divide.
That's the key. This is a very distinct cohort effect. The exceptional longevity that put Okinawa on the map, the people we all read about in the books.
The famous centenarians.
Right. That longevity is almost entirely concentrated in one very specific population. The generations born before World War II.
Okay, so the people who grew up in that environment of extreme caloric scarcity.
And rigid adherence to the old ways. The traditional diet, the social habits, they are literally the last vestiges of the Blue Zone era.
So as those older cohorts die off, the island's average life expectancy just falls off a cliff?
Precisely. Because the younger generations are fundamentally different. The generations born after the 1960s, they display dramatically worsened mortality profiles.
And the causes of death tell the whole story.
They tell the entire story of globalization's damage. Their grandparents lived these long, healthy lives, avoiding the big killers. The younger Okinawans, however, now have significantly higher death rates from NCDs, non-communicable diseases.
Like heart disease and stroke.
Specifically, ischemic heart disease, stroke, and increasingly diabetes, higher than the Japanese mainland. This split, this bifurcation, is the ultimate proof that the blue zone status was environmental, and it is literally dying off with its oldest residents.
We tend to focus on lifestyle, the sweet potatoes, the community, but the source material brings up this deep, critical biological driver that makes the collapse feel almost inevitable.
It does.
The thrifty phenotype hypothesis. This is where it gets really interesting and, well, kind of tragic.
This is maybe the most elegant explanation for the whole thing. It all centers on an evolutionary trade-off. Historically, Okinawa was poor, it was isolated, and it was subject to famines.
Right.
So as a result, researchers found that Okinawa consistently had a low birth weight rate. That's infants born under 5.5 pounds. That was about 20% higher than mainland Japan.
So if you're a baby born in pre-war Okinawa, your body is essentially programmed in the womb, because of your mother's nutrition, to be an incredibly efficient saver of energy.
That's the absolute core of the thrifty phenotype. The fetus adapts. The metabolism is programmed to anticipate and survive in a world where calories are scarce. It makes the body magnificent at conserving and storing energy.
Which is a huge advantage during a famine.
An undeniable advantage. But that biological programming, the very thing that saved one generation, became a lethal vulnerability for the next one.
And that vulnerability was exposed with the post-war American occupation. It was just a rapid, uncontrolled metabolic disaster.
The mismatch was catastrophic. Suddenly, you have this generation carrying this highly efficient, thrift-programmed body, and you thrust them into a rapidly westernizing food environment.
An environment of extreme caloric abundance.
Right. High-density processed foods, huge portions. A metabolism that was designed to thrive on maybe 1,500 calories a day was suddenly hit with 3,000 calories of processed fuel.
So what happens when a thrifty phenotype meets an infinite buffet?
The body goes into metabolic overdrive. That intense efficiency, which was a defense mechanism, it just massively amplified the risk of all the NCDs in adulthood.
So it translates directly into rapid fat storage.
Rapid fat storage, insulin resistance, a total breakdown of metabolic homeostasis. And that leads directly to the explosion of type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome that we now see in the younger Okinawans. It's the ultimate irony.
So the environment changed, and the primary agent of that change was diet. Let's look at what they were eating before. The traditional Okinawan diet was, it was a masterclass in anti-inflammatory nutrition.
It was unique, even compared to the rest of Japan. Their staple carb wasn't high glycemic white rice. It was the purple sweet potato, the beni imo.
Right.
That tuber was the backbone of their caloric intake. It provides complex carbs, so it releases sugar slowly, tons of fiber, potent antioxidants, all while being naturally very low in fat.
And they had the cultural software to manage it, the practice of hara hachibu.
The 80% rule. Eating until you're only 80% full. It's a cultural practice that ensures a mild, sustained state of caloric restriction. It's the behavioral piece of the puzzle.
But the American military occupation after World War II just blew that all up. It accelerated what you call the nutrition transition.
It did. It completely disrupted a centuries-old balance, decades ahead of the mainland.
And this is where Spam comes in, literally the iconic symbol of American military rations.
Exactly. The introduction of highly processed Western foods, cheap carbs, sugary drinks, fast food, and canned meats like Spam and hot dogs, it just fundamentally altered the island's entire macronutrient profile.
For a population used to scarcity, that dense, high-fat, high-sodium food must have been incredibly appealing.
It was. It was hyper-palatable, and it symbolized modernity. Abundance.
And the data shows just how fast that adoption happened.
Yeah, the speed is alarming. Get this. By 1988, Okinawans' daily meat intake was already 20% higher than the Japanese national average.
Wow. In a culture that traditionally ate very little meat.
A massive jump. And if you increase meat, you dramatically increase fat. By 1998, the fat-energy ratio in their diet surpassed 30%. That's the threshold for a westernized diet.
So the kids were rejecting the traditional bitter melon stir-fry
for fast food, for high-fat, hyper-palatable alternatives. The consequences laid bare today. Okinawa, the former epicenter of healthy aging, now has the highest rates of obesity and the highest average BMI in all of Japan.
The Okinawa story is the most dramatic, but this erosion is happening globally. Let's look at Sardinia. They had their own unique statistical anomaly.
They did. Sardinia, especially the mountainous Ogliastra region, is famous for its male-to-female centenarian ratio. Globally, it's about 1 man for every 5 women who live to 100.
And in Sardinia?
It was approaching 1 to 1. Their men were surviving just as well as their women, which is extremely rare.
What was protecting the Sardinian men? It wasn't just the red wine, I'm guessing.
No, the wine was a side note. The core advantage was the intense physical demands of their economy. Pastoralism. They were shepherds.
So they were walking a lot.
Miles and miles every day.
Yeah.
5 to 10 miles across rugged, steep terrain. This daily, non-stop physical stimulus generated an incredibly high level of what we call NEAT.
Non-exercise activity thermogenesis? That's the energy you burn just living your life, not from formal exercise.
Exactly. And that constant, demanding physical work was a massive, lifelong protective factor for their cardiovascular system. It kept their insulin sensitivity high, their bodies lean.
But genetics played a role too, didn't they?
It did. There's a founder effect from the isolation. So genetics account for maybe 20–25% of the variance. But the advantage was heavily, heavily dependent on that challenging environment.
And just like in Okinawa, modernity removed the need for that environment.
Right. The shift to a sedentary service economy, driving a truck instead of walking with the herd, it removed that protective physical stimulus. The young men just don't have the same inputs.
And what about 𝐏𝐿𝐴 in Costa Rica? The material suggests that was an even more specific transient window.
Transient window is the key phrase. Survival analyses confirmed the 𝐏𝐿𝐴 advantage was highly specific to cohorts born before 1930.
So men coming of age in the 30s and 40s.
Exactly. They had a much higher probability of reaching 90 or 100. Their lifestyle was defined by hard, physical, agricultural labor and that traditional Three Sisters diet: corn, beans, and squash.
But for anyone born after 1945,
the advantage is gone. Their mortality profiles are statistically indistinguishable from the rest of Costa Rica. You introduce cars, mechanization, packaged foods, TV. You dismantle the conditions that created the accidental centenarian.
Okay, so as these advantages dissolve, we have to talk about the skepticism around the data itself. People have raised critical questions about statistical artifacts, even fraud. Are we sure we aren't chasing ghosts here?
This is a crucial point. It separates the legitimate, validated blue zones from the mythology. The skepticism arose because the places with the highest number of claimed supercentenarians were often regions with high poverty, low literacy, and, terrible administrative records.
Which leads to age exaggeration.
It does, and sometimes outright fraud. We hear the term zombie centenarians.
Right.
That's often related to pension benefits. There's an incentive to hide the death of an elderly relative to keep collecting their stipend. Places like Vilcabamba in Ecuador were largely debunked because of this.
So how did the authentic zones like Sardinia and Okinawa prove their case?
Through rigorous, painstaking validation protocols. First, genealogical research. Cross-referencing civil records with church and parish records, sometimes going back centuries, to verify exact birth and death dates.
A huge paper trail, but what about migration? What if old people were just moving there?
That's where they calculated the Extreme Longevity Index, or ELI. It proves that the probability of a newborn in that region surviving to 100 is statistically higher than the surrounding area. It rules out migration.
But relying on old paperwork feels a little precarious in the age of biomedical science.
And that's the essential transition we have to make. We need to move beyond just validating chronological age and toward validating with biological biomarkers.
So measuring things like telomere length.
Telomere length, epigenetic age, using tools like the Horvath clock.
Right.
We need to prove they were aging slower biologically, not just that their paperwork was right. That's the future.
Okay, so the big takeaway from all that is definitive. The place itself is no longer the magic bullet. Longevity was an output of environmental pressures that are now gone. So we have to stop romanticizing geography and start looking at the biology.
Absolutely. We have to understand the molecular architecture. Longevity isn't magic. It's a biological outcome of specific signaling pathways that, it turns out, can be engineered.
And that architecture rests on 3 pillars: metabolic regulation, genetic resilience, and
epigenetic modulation.
Yeah.
The decay of Blue Zone 1.0 confirmed the critical link.
Yeah.
Their behaviors directly trigger these conserved biological pathways for survival.
The most consistent behavior across all the zones was some form of caloric restriction, and the molecular translator for that scarcity is the mTOR pathway.
That's right. mTOR, the mechanistic target of rapamycin, is the cell's master nutrient sensor. Think of it as the cell's growth switch or abundance detector.
So when food is abundant, the standard Western diet, what's mTOR doing?
It's highly active. Specifically, mTORC1 is active. It slams the accelerator on all growth processes. protein synthesis, cell division. It's telling the cell, keep growing, food is plentiful.
Which is great when you're a kid, but not so great when you're an adult.
Because chronic activation actually inhibits the necessary defense and repair mechanism.
So when you apply scarcity, like the 80% rule of Hara-Hachibu,
that sustained, mild nutrient scarcity acts like a circuit breaker. It powerfully inhibits mTORC1. And this, in addition, is the biological switch we're looking for. It shifts the cell from growth mode to survival and repair mode.
And that repair phase is called autophagy, the cellular cleanup crew.
Autophagy, literally self-eating. It's the most critical cellular recycling system. When mTOR is inhibited, it triggers this pathway. The cell starts identifying and breaking down damaged parts.
Like dysfunctional mitochondria or misfolded proteins.
Exactly. The junk that accumulates with age. Beta amyloid plaques in the brain, for example. The traditional blue zone diets, by keeping mTOR in check, maintained a high level of the cellular cleanup, this high autophagic flux, well into old age.
Okay, so there's another parallel pathway that CR activates, the sirtuins and NAD+.
Right. If mTOR is the growth switch, sirtuins are the cell's high-level maintenance crew. They're essential for DNA repair and genomic stability. But to do their job, they need fuel.
And that fuel is NAD plus white.
Nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. Caloric restriction increases the bioavailability of NAD plus white. When the cell detects low energy, it makes more NAD plus ploaccent. This supercharges the sirtuins, allowing them to diligently repair DNA damage.
And the Western diet does the opposite.
It suppresses NAD plus availability. So you're simultaneously flooring the accelerator with mTOR and taking the repair crew offline by starving the sirtuins. It's a double whammy.
So genetics plays a role, maybe 20–25% for those who live past 90. But the crucial insight is the gene-environment interaction. We're not looking for one magic gene.
We're looking for a gene that gets turned on by the right environment. That's the essence of Blue Zone 2.0. The most replicated genetic determinant of extreme longevity is the FOXO3 gene.
FOXO3. And you describe it as the cell's defense general.
That's a great way to think of it. Its job is to survey the cellular landscape and integrate signals about stress and metabolic status.
So how is this general normally kept in check?
In a state of caloric abundance, with high insulin signaling, a growth pathway essentially tags the FOXO3 protein and traps it in the cytoplasm outside the nucleus.
So you're locking the defense general in the barracks?
Exactly, while telling the cell everything's fine, keep growing.
So the environmental trigger, that low glycemic, calorie-restricted diet, is the key that unlocks the general.
That's it. Low insulin signaling is the unlock mechanism. It allows the FOXO3 protein to move from the cytoplasm into the nucleus, the command center. Once it's in there, it binds to the DNA and activates a whole suite of critical defense genes.
What kind of defense program are we talking about?
We're talking about major biological armor, upregulating stress resistance, enhancing DNA repair, and producing powerful antioxidants. But here's the punchline. The gene variant is not enough on its own. You can have the long-lived variant, but if you live on Spam and fast food, that gene stays locked in the barracks. It needs the environmental trigger to activate the defense program. Modernization deactivated this genetic shield.
Beyond the genome, there's the epigenome, which is how we get this massive plasticity, this ability to slow our biological clock. And the source material points to a fascinating twin study.
Yes, the science of epigenetic clocks, which measure DNA methylation patterns to estimate biological age, has shown this profound plasticity. The study took identical twins. One was put on a standard diet, the other on a whole food plant-based diet for just 8 weeks.
8 weeks? That's a tiny window. What did they find?
They found that the vegan cohort showed significant measurable reductions in their epigenetic age estimates. It's a direct, rapid impact. Your lifestyle choices are literally changing how your genes are operating right now.
What about stress? We know telomere shortening is sensitive to stress. How does the psychosocial element fit in?
Telomeres, the protective caps on our chromosomes, are highly sensitive. Chronic psychological stress, anxiety, it accelerates their shortening. Conversely, the deep social support found in the traditional blue zones is statistically associated with longer telomeres. Your social safety net is literally protecting the integrity of your DNA.
But we're not trying to eliminate all stress. We're looking for beneficial stress. Hormesis.
Hormesis is key. It's beneficial biological stress. And modern science is actively mimicking the hormetic inputs of the past. Take cold exposure.
Right.
Controlled, deliberate cold exposure triggers the release of norepinephrine and activates brown adipose tissue, or BAT.
That's the good metabolically active fat that burns energy to generate heat.
Exactly. And the protocol is surprisingly short. Research suggests just 11 minutes of deliberate cold exposure per week is enough to boost metabolism and enhance that same autophagy response we talked about earlier.
And heat stress, like from a sauna, provides a similar benefit.
Correct. Heat induces heat shock proteins, which act like cellular mechanics, repairing other proteins. Both are deliberate ways to activate those conserved defense programs that were just inherent in the old blue zone lifestyle.
Okay, so if the biology is the hardware, the social environment is the software. You can eat perfectly, but if you're socially isolated, you're compromising your health. And the epidemic of loneliness is a potent, measurable mortality driver.
We cannot overstate this. In Okinawa, the moai is the classic example. These are socially engineered support groups formed in childhood that last their entire lives.
It's a built-in social safety net.
It is. It's more than friendship. It's a structural intervention against life's stresses. And we have hard data to back this up. The landmark meta-analysis by Julianne Holt-Lundstad quantified the power of social relationships on survival. The finding was startling.
What was it?
Having strong social connections increases your likelihood of survival by 50%.
50%. That's an incredible effect size.
It's directly comparable to quitting smoking, and it actually exceeds the survival impact of avoiding obesity or physical inactivity.
Wow.
The mechanism is stress physiology. Social isolation triggers a deep threat response, which elevates cortisol and leads to systemic inflammation. The moai downregulates that entire damaging stress response.
The other key piece of psychosocial software is purpose ikigai in Okinawa, plan de vida in Nicoya. The reason for waking up in the morning, this isn't just philosophy, it's a quantified survival factor.
Absolutely. Purpose is measurable resilience. Large-scale studies show a high sense of purpose is associated with a substantially reduced risk of all-cause mortality, a hazard ratio of 0.60.
So a 40% reduction in mortality risk, how does a psychological belief translate into that kind of physiological resilience?
It acts as a deep psychological buffer against stress. Researchers found that people with a high sense of purpose have much faster cortisol recovery after a stressful event. Your body returns to baseline quicker. And they exhibit lower levels of allostatic load. That's the cumulative wear and tear on the body from chronic stress. The ikigai provides the psychological and physiological armor to protect the body.
So the romantic vision is over. The biological blueprint is clear. Caloric restriction, sustained movement, beneficial stress, and deep social connection. But the only way to achieve that in a modern city is through intentional structural design.
And this brings us to Singapore.
This brings us to Singapore, the world's first engineered longevity hotspot.
Singapore provides the template for Blue Zone 2.0. They couldn't rely on poverty or isolation, so this modern, high-density metropolis is using policy, technology, and wealth to reverse engineer the environmental pressures that promote long life.
They're not waiting for healthy habits to emerge. They're building a system where healthy choices are the mandatory, or at least the easiest choices.
Exactly.
And the cornerstone of this is the National Initiative Healthier SG. It's a total paradigm shift away from the sick care model most of us live in.
The shift is fundamental. From reactive and curative to proactive and preventive. Most healthcare systems use a fee-for-service model. Providers earn more when you're sick.
The incentive is backwards.
Completely. Healthier SG is restructuring public healthcare funding using a capitation model.
Okay, let's dive into capitation, because this is the financial engine that drives the whole thing. How does it work?
Under capitation, your GP is paid a predetermined fixed annual fee per resident to manage your health for the year.
Regardless of how many times you visit.
Irrespective. This flips the incentive structure completely. If the population stays healthy, the system keeps the surplus. If they get sick, the system bears the heavy cost.
So it forces the system to focus relentlessly on prevention and screening.
Yes. And it mandates that all residents 40 and over enroll with a single dedicated GP who becomes their health architect, developing a personalized health plan.
And the state provides the blueprints for that.
Right. They have standardized care protocols for things like hypertension and diabetes, and they remove the financial barrier to adherence with the subsidy framework, the Healthier SG chronic tier, to ensure medication is affordable. It's about aggressively preventing minor conditions from escalating.
The traditional blue zone's forced movement. The Sardinian shepherd had to climb. Singapore is a vertical city, but they're using urban design to enforce the move naturally principle. They're engineering neat into the concrete.
They've prioritized the pedestrian over the vehicle, especially in their silver zones in elderly neighborhoods. These are literal architectural interventions.
What kind of features are we talking about?
Sharply reduced speed limits, chicanes to physically slow traffic, narrowed lanes, and crucially, two-stage pedestrian crossings.
Two-stage crossings. It sounds like a small detail.
But it's profound. It allows a senior who can't cross a wide road quickly to stop safely on a central median and rest. It removes a massive psychological and physical barrier to walking.
And what's the impact?
It's measurable. An approximately 80% reduction in road accidents involving senior pedestrians in these zones. It replicates the shepherd's walk in a controlled urban setting.
And they took the idea of intergenerational community and built it vertically with places like Kampong Admiralty.
Kampong Admiralty is a prototype, a vertical village for longevity. It integrates senior housing, a medical center, food courts, and critically co-located childcare and senior care centers.
So it's deliberate. It forces the kind of organic interaction that modernization usually kills.
It is deliberate social engineering to counteract isolation. By putting the childcare center next to the senior care center, you force intergenerational interaction. It's a known intervention for reducing isolation and slowing cognitive decline.
Okay, so if the nutrition transition destroyed Okinawa, Singapore knew it had to be aggressive. Their war on sugar uses the Nutrigrade mandatory labeling system.
It's one of the world's most powerful interventions. Beverages are graded A to D based on sugar and saturated fat. It's a mandatory, color-coded health warning you can't ignore.
But the real power comes from the restriction on the D grade.
That's the leverage point, the D ban. Beverages graded D are strictly prohibited from advertising on any media platform. Billboards, social media, TV, all of it.
It's a shaming mechanism. If I'm a big beverage company, I have to avoid that D label or my product is invisible.
Precisely. And the result was immediate market reformulation. The median sugar level of prepackaged beverages dropped from 7.1% in 2017 to 4.6% by 2023. Companies voluntarily removed thousands of tons of sugar from the national diet just to avoid the ad ban.
The final piece of the puzzle is the social safety net. Singapore couldn't wait for the Okinawan moai to emerge naturally. They had to manufacture it.
They systematically engineer social networks. Through programs at community hubs, their active aging centers, they're operationalizing social connection.
How does a state operationalize friendship?
Through things like walking moais. The state actively organizes groups of 5 to 8 elderly neighbors to meet and walk together weekly. It provides physical activity and, more importantly, it turns neighbors into accountability partners and a support unit.
Replicating the exact function of the traditional moai.
Exactly. And that sense of purpose, ikigai, is engineered as well. By shifting the senior's identity from passive healthcare recipients to active community contributors.
How so?
Through programs like Share a Pot, where seniors cook and distribute community meals. This transformation is key. They aren't just being cared for, they are contributing. This reinforces their sense of purpose, which we know is crucial for physiological resilience.
So to synthesize this, Blue Zone 1.0 was accidental, driven by scarcity and isolation. Blue Zone 2.0 is intentional, driven by policy, wealth, and smart urbanism.
The divergence is stark. The old model relied on external necessity. The engineered model replaces that necessity with infrastructure and regulation designed to make the healthy choice the default choice.
But if Singapore's the blueprint, we have to talk about scalability. Can a large individualistic country like the U.S. replicate this level of control?
That is the major, unavoidable limitation. Singapore's success is based on its unique status as a centralized city-state with a high degree of social trust.
Which lets them implement what some would call paternalistic policies.
Aggressive car restrictions, mandatory health enrollment, banning ads for certain foods. These might face overwhelming political resistance in cultures that prioritize absolute freedom of choice over collective health outcomes. That's the friction point.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We can't all move to a vertical village, and we know the romantic idea of returning to a peasant lifestyle is obsolete.
The future of longevity is no longer geographic. It is structural and biological. For you, it relies on two things. First, the individual application of science-based hormetic stressors.
Things like fasting, cold exposure, structuring your day for high NEAT.
To activate those conserved genetic pathways like FOXO3. And second, it means engineering your personal life to mirror the Singapore model.
Creating a personal environment where the healthy choice is the default.
Exactly. We have to use this knowledge for structural application in our own lives. The era of the accidental centenary is over. The blue zone is no longer a place you find on a map. It's a system you build by design.
So we'll leave you with this provocative closing thought. What structures in your own life, social, dietary, or environmental, need to be engineered to make the healthy choice the default choice? If the centenarian future is built, not found, what blueprint are you following to build your own personal blue zone?